Billionaires, the worst people on the planet. Monsters who are gobbling up the Earth's resources so that they can log a high score on the global money leaderboards. Or are they? We on the left often say that there's no such thing as a good billionaire, but have any of us actually gone out and checked? Is it possible that the good these ghouls do outweighs the incalculable exploitation that they use to be able to do it? No, it isn't. And we'll explore why here on Good Billionaires, because to be good at being a billionaire, you have to be bad at being a human being. Hello, I'm Thought Soup, and I have lived for more than 1 billion seconds. If I had made $110 a second since the day I was born, I would have about as much money as Bill Gates, the world-famous computer man who co-founded Microsoft, the company who makes Windows and Xbox and owns Minecraft. William Henry Gates III, yeah, you heard me right, that's his name, is on the surface, pun intended, a complex person who wears a lot of hats. At different times in his life, he's been a software trailblazer, a CEO, a monopolist, the villain of the open software movement, the richest man on earth, and without a doubt, one of the world's greatest philanthropists. He definitely gives the most money to philanthropic causes, and manages the world's second largest charitable foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Growing up in the late 90s and early aughts, Bill Gates was seen as a pretty sinister figure, a dangerously powerful and unthinkably wealthy miser who used his power and influence to stifle competition, a corrupt and deeply uncool tyrant whose products held us all for ransom due to their sheer ubiquity. Sure, you could use another operating system, you didn't have to use Windows, but God knows whether any program you wanted to use was going to be compatible. In the past couple decades, though, his charity work has softened his image considerably. According to YouGov, he is the most well-liked business figure on the planet, and it's not hard to see why. I think it would be dishonest to pretend as though the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is not doing any good in the world. You can't give billions of dollars to charity without at least incidentally doing some good work. However, I think people greatly overestimate the impact of that work and tend to overlook the problems it creates. I also think they tend to forget just how exactly Gates raised the capital to be able to do that work, and the human cost thereof. Microsoft revolutionized the personal computer, but did so through some pretty shady business practices. In the 90s, Microsoft offered manufacturers discounts on licensing fees if they paid the fees for their products whether or not they contained Microsoft software, essentially using their enormous install base to stifle competition. Microsoft's bundling of software with its operating system, most notably Internet Explorer, was ruled to have violated the Sherman Antitrust Act, meaning that Microsoft had used its monopolistic power over the market to unfairly push its products over competitors, and make their competitors' products more difficult to use in the Microsoft-saturated PC market. To this day, Microsoft makes it difficult to uninstall Internet Explorer. I'm guessing the first thing that most of you do when you buy a PC is install Chrome or Firefox if you're a big nerd. And then you try in vain, can I just get rid of Internet Explorer so it's not on my hard drive? You cannot. Or maybe you can, but you gotta do some registry shit. I don't know. They make it too hard. Microsoft was also known for its contempt of open source software, viewing it as a potential threat to their proprietary software. They developed a strategy called Embrace, Enhance, Extinguish, sometimes more charitably referred to as Embrace, Enhance, Innovate, whereby they would take a piece of software intended to be used across multiple different environments, add proprietary features that could only be used on Windows and would cause compatibility problems for anyone attempting to run the software in other environments, and then use those unique features to disincentivize users from using competitor software. Microsoft also has a history of hiring workers on a permatemp basis, meaning that employees who could be working for Microsoft for years are hired as temporary workers in order to avoid paying them benefits. Even those who manage to get permanent positions report being overworked, often leading to burnout. Microsoft also employed a system called stack ranking, whereby each employee was ranked according to their performance, with some being ranked as top performers and others as poor performers. This approach meant that someone always had to be labeled a poor performer, meaning that there was a never-ending competition between employees, and a person's compensation could suffer as a result. You can imagine how that might create a stressful work environment, particularly when one is expected to work as part of a team. Keep that in mind, it's going to come up again later. Remember the HoloLens? The cool-looking tech demo where you could play Minecraft on your table? Well, Microsoft signed a $480 million contract to put that type of augmented reality into the hands of the United States military so they could use it to blow stuff up like they like to do. According to The Guardian, Many of the engineers who worked on building the technology believed it would be used to help architects and engineers build buildings and cars, to help teach people how to perform surgery or play the piano, to push the boundaries of gaming, and connect with the Mars rover, RIP. Under the terms of the Army contract, however, the devices will be used to, quote, increase lethality by enhancing the ability to detect, decide, and engage before the enemy. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I tend to think we should be trying to decrease lethality where applicable. I might go so far as to say that accepting $480 million to increase the lethality of weapons for the military makes them war profiteers, a sentiment shared by Microsoft Workers for Good, a group of Microsoft employees who protested this arrangement. Oh, and also, Microsoft provides cloud services for ICE. You know, the guys rounding up immigrants and putting children in concentration camps, that ICE. Let's hear how the current CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, justifies this in a letter he published on Microsoft-owned LinkedIn. I want to be clear, Microsoft is not working with the US government on any project related to separating children from their families at the border. Our current cloud engagement with US Immigration and Customs Enforcement is supporting legacy mail, calendar, messaging, and document management workloads. So, couple things. Number one, they definitely use those tools you just talked about to organize the separations and detentions that you claim to object to. And two, even if they didn't, this is kind of like saying, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we do have business ties with ISIS, but we're not funding terrorism, we're just selling them tires. Now obviously, Gates didn't make those choices. He wasn't working at Microsoft during either of those contracts, but as one of their largest shareholders who, as far as I can tell, has made no public statement condemning these contracts, he's complicit, and he's making a shitload of money off of them. On the day that that LinkedIn letter was released, Gates was tweeting about how his fellow billionaire Warren Buffett is really good at pinball. Also, I think it goes to show the kind of corporate culture he fostered at Microsoft, the way that they dodge responsibility by not being directly involved in the ongoing human rights crisis at the American border. No, they're just tangentially involved, like a little bit. Well, feel free to look away, Mr. Gates. You can, after all. You have that privilege to simply turn your head and the mere two eyeballs within it turn with you. But all around us the eyeballs see. They know your sins, your secret vices. They cannot choose not to see. They see all. And when they are done with us, we will all see. And we will all understand. Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone. Here in the Eyeball Zone, we imprison small leftist content creators forever within an ever-expanding and all-consuming iris. You know, sometimes here on YouTube, bigger accounts can overshadow smaller ones. Sometimes when I cover a topic, it means that if a smaller channel, who might have even done a better job, can get left behind. And I think while discussing a person like Bill Gates, that's especially troubling for me because I don't want to reproduce the same kinds of bullying behaviors, even unconsciously, that Bill Gates used to make his money. So, while they didn't actually ask me to be eyeballed, I don't think, let me check on that. Oh, okay, August. Whoops. Anyway, when I saw that Another Slice had made a video about Bill Gates while I was working on a video about Bill Gates, I thought, well, that's pretty unlucky. I don't want to contribute to them being overlooked, so I'd recommend you check out their video listed in the description. It covers a lot of the same stuff I'm talking about here, but more in depth in some places, and I'm using the qualifier in some places to be generous to myself. But it makes a good comparison piece to this video. Do you have an explicitly leftist project you'd like to feed to the braying eyeball beasts? Send me no more than one email with pertinent details like your pronouns, and maybe you will find yourself trapped here in the Eyeball Zone. But enough about ice, let's talk about the Ice Bucket Challenge. Bill Gates is a world-renowned philanthropist. That's why I started this series with him, because I imagine if I started with any other billionaire, everyone would be screaming at me in the comment section, oh yeah, smarty pants, what about Billiam Gates? He made the amazing toilets for countries that previously had substandard toilets, and sanitation may not be glamorous, but it is important, and please do not mistake my criticism of Bill Gates for criticism of his very good toilet and the importance of sanitation. However, despite the good work that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has achieved, there are a few problems with their methods and the causes they choose to support. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's generous donations result in a frankly ridiculous access to the seats of power worldwide. They contribute 10% of the World Health Organization's yearly operating budget, and thus possess a disproportionate authority over the WHO's priorities. Likewise, in 2013, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was the single largest donor to the UN Health Agency, donating more than the US government. And while it's good that they're funding these operations, it's bad that individual people have such influence over the objectives of these organizations. It means that the individual pet projects of Bill and Melinda Gates may receive greater funding than areas that may require it more. Take, for example, the Gates Foundation focus on eradicating polio. I'm going to quote from No Such Thing as a Free Gift to the Gates Foundation and the Price of Philanthropy by Lindsay McGooey. Donald Henderson, a former WHO epidemiologist who led the WHO's successful campaign against smallpox during the 1960s, has suggested that polio eradication may be a misplaced pursuit. It strips money from other areas of need, forcing nations to prioritize polio immunization at the expense of vaccination coverage for other diseases. Arthur Kaplan, an eminent bioethicist who himself suffered from polio as a child, has also criticized Gates' obsession with polio eradication, pointing out that government budgets and resources in poorer nations are diverted from far more pressing local problems to try and capture the last marginal cases. Sonia Shaw, an award-winning journalist, has pointed out similar problems with eradication campaigns against malaria, efforts that, quite counterintuitively, have caused money to flood to where it is least needed. Shaw has pointed out a paradox of eradication versus control efforts. Eradicating a disease is, in several important respects, a goal diametrically opposed to controlling one. When public health leaders want to control a disease, they devote the majority of their resources to the areas of greatest needs, she writes. When their goal is eradication, then they must spend their resources on areas where eradication is most likely, the areas with the least need. Eradicating a disease means focusing on areas where the disease is close to being eradicated. That means pumping money for disease control into areas where categorically that disease is not doing very much damage. And while it would be good to eradicate polio in those areas, it shouldn't take priority over treating diseases that are less close to eradication and therefore are hurting more people. That might be a winning strategy in the board game Pandemic. It's not so great in real life. And I say might be because I've never actually won a game of Pandemic. Pandemic is too hard. The Gates Foundation giving towards educational reform has led to similarly disastrous results. One of the problems of allowing a few individuals to control how charitable funding is allocated is that they may assume they have better ideas than experts in the field. To quote Bill Gates, "It may surprise you. It was certainly surprising to us, but the field of education doesn't know very much at all about effective teaching." Not some teachers, not policymakers. No, the entire field of education does not understand effective teaching like Gates and his team does. To wit, Gates has long championed a system called value-added modeling, which attempts to track a teacher's individual contribution to a student's test scores. A system suspiciously similar to stack ranking in Microsoft. To quote the Washington Post, "It involves plugging the scores into formulas that supposedly can tell how much a teacher has contributed to the growth a student is making academically. VAM, which supposedly can factor out every other influence on a child, such as being hungry, has been panned by assessment experts for high-stakes decisions, but the education world embraced it during the Obama administration anyway." The foundation put these models to the test, pumping $575 million into a pilot project, only about $215 million of which it supplied itself, the rest being from schools that participated in the project. The final report on this project conducted by the Rand Foundation found that there was no evidence to suggest that the reforms had worked at all, and the project was quietly shelved. Thanks for the $260 million, local schools. Turns out the ideas that we came up with on our own without consulting experts didn't work. Oops! Furthermore, it's a mistake to assume that the entirety of the Gates Foundation's endowment is spent on the public good or in the interests of public health. The model of philanthropy that the Gates Foundation practices means that the foundation functions like a business. It makes investments to generate revenue, so that that revenue can, in theory, then pay for the activities of the foundation. A large portion of the foundation's endowment is tied up in Berkshire Hathaway, a holdings company led by Warren Buffett, the pinball wizard and Bill Gates' personal pal. Quoting again from No Such Thing as a Free Gift, "Currently, nearly half of the Gates Foundation endowment is invested in Berkshire Hathaway. Until recently, about 5% of the Gates Foundation endowment was invested in McDonald's, while over 7% was invested in Coca-Cola. That figure does not include the foundation's further investments in Berkshire Hathaway. Because, as the book notes, Berkshire Hathaway controls a major share of Coca-Cola. Investigative reports from the LA Times were the first to report widespread dissatisfaction with the Gates Foundation's endowment investments in companies such as ExxonMobil, pointing out that flares from oil plants mushrooming across the Niger Delta are widely believed to have caused epidemics of bronchitis in adults and lowered immunity in children, increasing their susceptibility to measles and, wait for it, polio. Publicly slated in the aftermath of the LA Times expose, Bill and Melinda at first announced that they would rethink their investment policies, and then retracted that decision. For years, with the exception of tobacco companies, the foundation chose to invest in companies offering strong financial returns, regardless of negative health effects. So the Gates Foundation is making investments in companies directly responsible for several human rights and health crises across the globe, directly contradicting their mandate, on the promise that that investment will someday be paid forward to charitable causes. But the whole amount is tax deductible now because they have the intention of using it for charity later. That sounds legit. This model of deferred charity is also the idea behind Gates and Buffett's brainchild, the Giving Pledge, an agreement between various billionaires to give a considerable amount of their wealth to philanthropic causes. Hundreds of billionaires have signed the pledge, everyone from Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk, even George Lucas, inventor of Star Trek. All have pledged to give away the majority of their wealth. As to how much they've given, it's not clear because the pledge doesn't actually require anyone to do anything and also doesn't dictate what is and is not a philanthropic cause. So, it's kind of like a PR campaign where billionaires can just say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna give away most of my money later," and then people will nod and go, "Oh, cool, yeah, no, well, if that's the case, then it's probably good for you to have a lot of money because you said you'd give it away later. So I guess actually, I like that you have a lot of money." And then about 1,000 op-eds get written every time one of these assholes signs the pledge, handing them fawning coverage for doing nothing whatsoever. So to wrap up, while I think it's pretty clear that the Gates Foundation does do good work, it's also true that the only reason it's able to pay for that work is because of the shady business dealings and exploitation that allowed Gates to amass his fortune in the first place, and the war profiteering and collaborating that sustains that fortune. Now that he has the money, he's certainly putting some of it to good use, I guess, but also diverting funds away from important causes to support his pet issues. His unparalleled personal discretion over how the money is spent also causes problems when the solutions he encourages are contrary to the advice of experts in the field. Furthermore, a considerable portion of the money Gates is celebrated for donating is tied up in investments that are not simply irrelevant to his foundation's stated goals, but directly contrary to them. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Bill Gates is an evil person with a black heart. I don't know the man. And from all available evidence, it seems like he genuinely believes what he's doing is in the common good. And sometimes it is. But I don't think the fact that he may occasionally use his money judiciously justifies the fact that he has all that access to the money in the first place. The elephant in the room, the thing that people seem to be unwilling to confront when discussing the philanthrocapitalism of billionaires like Gates, is that the reason there are so many poor people in the first place, the reason that they require charity in the first place, is because so much of the available wealth is tied up in the hands of Bill Gates and people like him. Hey, I hope you liked my video on Bill Gates, the computer man. If you did, I would love it if you pressed the like button to signify that, and also if you subscribe to me here on youtube.com, rang the YouTube bell that does YouTube stuff. You can also follow me at youtube.com/scaredycatstv. That's where I talk about horror movies. You can catch me live streaming every 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/thoughtslime. During the making of this video, my Windows PC completely shit the bed and died. And I had to reformat it and install all my programs again. And I can't say for certain that Bill Gates is personally responsible for that. But I think it would be irresponsible of me not to at least entertain the possibility that perhaps he has some sort of spying software that allows him to know when people are speaking poorly of him, and he can shut down their computers remotely. Once again, this is all something I genuinely believe could be possible. I definitely think that's what happened. And if it makes me sound paranoid, too bad, I'm right. Also, he might have put a microchip in my brain. A little bit, like a small one.